Good evening, I'm Claudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. Could U.S. troops join European forces guarding any ceasefire in Ukraine? According to President Zelenskyy, the issue was discussed with President Trump. More on that in just a moment, but first, our other top stories.
We will cease to exist after this agreement. Within a year, it could be 80% of farms, a total collapse.
All those products will have to meet the EU standards.
In nearly 200 sites across Poland, farmers demonstrated against a trade agreement between the EU and South American states.
I don't believe he's going to be doing it.
Does it worry you?
No, nothing worries me.
But
Nothing.
China conducts live-fire military drills 50 kilometers from the shores of Taiwan.
This is the minimum standard of civilization that Poland must be able to afford.
When it comes to the very basic rights, the very basic human rights, it is still a large change.
And Poland's government adopts a scaled-down civil union bill, but whether it comes into force will be up to the country's conservative president. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk says peace in Ukraine could be achieved within weeks. He also suggested that the U.S. was ready to send troops to Ukraine. After a question from TVP World, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said U.S. troops in Ukraine would be a strong position of security guarantees, but Washington would have to confirm this. Kazimierz Łysiak has more on the latest developments.
Following the meeting between US and Ukrainian presidents last weekend, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk seems to have revealed a major detail concerning security guarantees promised by the United States.
The key outcome of recent days is the American declaration, and this is of course something new. Some were even surprised. The American declaration of the United States' readiness to participate in security guarantees for Ukraine after the conclusion of peace, including the presence of American troops, for example, on the border or on the line of contact between Ukraine and Russia.
But the potential presence of US troops on Ukrainian soil hasn't been announced or confirmed by Trump himself. President Zelenskyy says he would like that solution, but confirmation would have to come from the White House.
This can only be confirmed by the President of the United States. Of course, we're discussing this both with President Trump and with the coalition of the willing. We would like this. It would be a strong position for security guarantees.
These developments have put the Polish Prime Minister in an optimistic mood when talking about the prospects of peace.
Peace is on the horizon. When I'm talking about peace being on the horizon, I'm talking more in terms of coming weeks, not months or years.
But there is still a major obstacle in the way of peace. Any presence of NATO troops in Ukraine has been repeatedly rejected by Russia.
Russia has been saying for a while that it will not tolerate foreign troops on the territory of Ukraine at all. I don't think that Ukrainians would accept a peace agreement without actual, at least tripwire type of capability of NATO troops on its territory.
And any peace agreement would require Moscow's approval, which now seems to be further away, as Russia is hinting at backing out of the talks.
Given the final degeneration of the criminal Kiev regime, which has switched to a policy of state terrorism, Russia's negotiating position will be reviewed.
This review of Russia's approach to the peace process comes after it accused Ukraine of targeting Vladimir Putin's residence in Valdai. But Moscow has also failed to provide any evidence of this alleged attack.
The Kiev regime launched a terrorist attack using 91 long-range strike unmanned aerial vehicles on the state residence of the President of the Russian Federation in the Novgorod region.
This accusation was met with anger of President Trump.
This is not the right time. It's one thing to be offensive, because they're offensive. It's another thing to attack his house. It's not the right time to do any of that, and can't do it. And I learned about it from President Putin today. I was very angry about it.
As well as immediate reactions from some of Russia's closest partners, like India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Deeply concerned by reports of the targeting of the residence of the President of the Russian Federation.
And yet the numbers simply don't add up. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed it downed 47 drones over the entire Novgorod region that night, while Lavrov spoke about 91 drones taken down above Putin's residence alone. Ukrainian officials are urging the world not to trust Russia's claims.
We were disappointed and concerned to see the statements by Emirati, Indian and Pakistani sides expressing their concerns regarding the attack that never happened.
Kyiv is now accusing Russia of using this alleged attack as an excuse to pull out of the peace talks. While Ukraine, Europe and the US may be eager to end the war, Russia has so far shown no intention of stopping its unprovoked invasion. For TVP World, Kazimierz Łysiak.
This evening, President Zelenskyy confirmed that he was planning a high-level summit on security with representatives of the Coalition of the Willing on January 3rd in Ukraine. But moving away from the European continent, another storm could be brewing in the Far East as China conducts some of the boldest and most aggressive military exercises around Taiwan in recent memory. The drills, however, are not aimed at intimidating only Taiwan, according to official statements by Beijing, but also at targeting external interference. These live-fire drills come only days after the U.S. announced a package of over $11 billion in arms sales to Taiwan, the largest in the island's history. Michiel von Blumestein reports.
Operation Justice Mission 2025. It's the most aggressive Chinese military exercise in recent years, with live fire drills conducted as close as 50 kilometers from Taiwanese shores. It involves at least 70 warplanes and 28 ships, including amphibious assault ships. Chinese missiles have landed in Taiwan's exclusive waters. Not only is the scale of the drills larger than before, it's also a stated goal of the Chinese forces to target, quote, external interference.
It is very clear that the explicit aim is to blockade the key installations, in this case, the ports, for instance.
But despite openly showing off China's capabilities to cut off the island from their American allies, US President Donald Trump didn't seem to be bothered.
Well, I have a great relationship with President Xi, and he hasn't told me anything about it. I certainly have seen it, but he hasn't told me anything about it, and I don't believe he's going to be doing it.
Does it worry you?
No, nothing worries me.
But
nothing.
The president's words fly in the face of assessments made by his own US Ministry of Defense only last week. The Pentagon reports that China's aiming to be able to subjugate Taiwan, which it considers a breakaway province, by the end of 2027. Experts warn Trump's muted response is exactly what the Chinese were hoping for. One analyst points out to TVP World that recent talks between the US and China on economic matters and rare earths constitute a carrot from Beijing. The military exercises are the stick.
The response we just heard might be used as a confirmation for the Chinese that, yes, Donald Trump acknowledges their exercises, but it is not something that would stop him from engaging in serious conversations with the Chinese on different topics.
The economic interests around the island are tremendous. Taiwan sits alongside key commercial shipping and aviation routes, with $2.45 trillion in trade moving through the Taiwan Strait each year. But Europe should also be concerned with a possible Chinese invasion of Taiwan.
There is a high probability of a scenario that if China escalates towards Taiwan, it opens up a window for opportunity for Russia in Europe. And that needs to be a concern from Poland's perspective. That also links these two theaters.
For TVP World, Michiel van Blumestein.
The EU-Mercosur deal is facing more opposition in the European Union, this time from Polish farmers, who mobilized in almost 190 locations across Poland to oppose the deal, which they believe would favor competition from South American agricultural corporations. Questions now remain: where does the Polish government now stand on the issue, and is the EU going to ratify the deal come 2026 after years of waiting? More on that in a report by Natalia Komarov.
Polish farmers mobilized in over 180 spots across the country to protest the EU-Mercosur trade deal, a deal Polish President Karol Nawrocki called catastrophic.
Today's protest is about showing up here in Elbląg and across the whole country, near expressways and highways where a lot of vehicles drive by, so that we are highly visible.
The agreement, which had been decades in the making, was supposed to be ratified in December, but President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen postponed the vote until January due to hesitation from France, Italy and Poland. Farmers in these countries have been most vocal in urging their governments to block the deal, fearing unfair competition from South American agricultural corporations.
You could say that this effectively means economic death for us, commercial farms. We will cease to exist after this agreement. Within a year, it could be 80% of farms, a total collapse.
Farmers also warn that food produced in South America won't meet EU standards.
And not just farmers, even consumers should be worried about what they will find at the grocery store in 2, 3, 4 years. What will the quality of the food be?
They are greatly misled because all those products will have to meet the EU standards.
The Polish government has been trying to appease the farmers, promising to seek a blocking minority amid European partners. Adoption of the contested agreement requires a qualified majority, which means 4 countries accounting for 35% of the EU population could prevent ratification.
If we don't manage to build a blocking minority, we will propose amendments, protection clauses, emergency breaks, compensation money for our farmers and food producers.
But while farmers oppose the deal, other industries hope to benefit from it. In 2024, the trade between EU and Mercosur countries, that is Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay, amounted to 111 billion euros, with agriculture consisting only around 28 billion.
Basically, this South American market has for decades been very protected by very high tariffs. So the EU is hoping to bring down those tariffs on manufacturing goods. That's number one. Number two, we're also hoping to liberalize the services markets.
Proponents of the deal believe opening the South American market would not only be beneficial, but also necessary for the EU amid US tariffs and growing tensions with China. Still, farmers in Poland vow to continue applying pressure on the government. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
After months of negotiations within the ruling coalition, the Polish government approved a bill granting more rights to unmarried couples. Though a new legislation lacks the label of civil unions, the so-called status of a close companion might offer respite to same-sex couples living in Poland. But as this marks a significant shift in policy, the final word will belong to the Polish president. Piotr Miszczuk has the details.
Some 900,000 Poles live in non-marital relationships. Now they might finally be gaining recognition under Polish law, as the government has approved a bill on the status of a close companion.
This is the minimum standard of civilization that Poland must be able to afford.
After some back and forth between 2 junior coalition partners, the Conservative Polish People's Party and Progressive The Left, the bill is ready to go to parliament.
We were looking for a good middle ground that was also dignified. And the fact that today the Council of Ministers adopted both bills, i.e. the bill on the status of a close companion and the bill on the provisions introducing this act, is above all a step towards security and legal protection.
The new law will regulate rights on using a shared home, the possibility of mutual alimony, mutual access to medical information and tax reliefs, to name but a few. Although the bill encompasses all unmarried couples and some rights are already available if certified by a notary, it may in fact prove to be a breakthrough for same-sex couples.
When it comes to the very basic rights, the very basic human rights, it is still a large change for civil society and for people that are actually in need.
Poland is the second least LGBT-friendly country within the European Union. Last month, the EU's top court urged the country to recognize the status of same-sex couples who got married abroad. The new bill will likely boost Poland's position in the ranking, but the crucial issue of child custody is not set to be resolved.
We know that the rainbow families are raising kids right now. It's possible that one person is adopting a child and it's considered a parent, the other is not.
Although, according to Prime Minister Tusk, while Parliament is likely to okay the bill, its future is not entirely in the hands of the ruling coalition.
The only question mark, and this is not a provocation, it is an appeal, will of course be the president's signature or a possible veto.
Conservative President Karol Nawrocki might hamper these efforts.
I will not sign any bill that undermines the status of marriage, which is protected by the Constitution. I am open to discussing the status of a close companion, but this cannot in any way come close to the protected institution of marriage.
According to Poland's equality ombudswoman Katarzyna Kotula, the status of a close companionship is significantly different from that of a marriage.
The most important thing for us will be what the president said. And he said that he would consider a law that is not similar to the institution of marriage, and there are a number of differences here.
But how President Nawrocki will interpret the bill remains to be seen. For TVP World, I'm Piotr Miszczuk.
Bulgaria is about to undergo a major shift on January 1st, as on that very day the country is set to move away from its original currency, the lev, to the euro, making it the 21st member state to adopt the bloc's single currency. Yet the shift in currency has divided the society, with some for and some strongly against the change. More in Maciej Wilowski's report.
Bulgaria is saying goodbye to its national currency, the lev or lion, which it has used since 1880, shortly after the country gained its independence from the Ottoman Empire. Starting January 1st, the country will become the 21st member state of the Eurozone, the club of countries which use the euro as their currency. But Bulgarians are deeply divided on adopting the common currency.
I think it's overdue because we should have adopted the euro a long time ago. I am against it. First, because the lev is our national currency. Secondly, Europe is heading towards demise, which even the American president mentioned in the new national security strategy.
Others say it will change little in their daily lives.
I travel abroad so much that I am used to the euro, and its adoption won't make any impression on me. I simply pay with a different type of currency. Those who are accustomed to it will have no problem.
In all, a narrow majority, or 53% of citizens, are against euro adoption, including 33% who are strongly against. That's the result of a Eurobarometer survey on the topic published last spring. But economists tend to view euro adoption positively.
The advantages of joining the Eurozone for Bulgaria are undisputable, having in mind that over 70% of its economic trade goes with the EU.
The adoption of the euro comes amid political turmoil and massive anti-corruption protests that toppled Bulgaria's government earlier this month. In Poland, one of just 6 EU member states that will still have their own currency, euro adoption has long been a politically contentious issue, with officials like Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski arguing in favor of adoption.
On Thursday, Bulgaria will adopt the euro. All salaries, pensions, invoices, savings and loans will be converted to euros. Consumers and businesses will pay lower installments without exchange rate risk. Inflation in the Eurozone is lower than in Poland.
And on January 1st, the Eurozone will welcome its newest member state. Maciej Wilowski for TVP World.
This truly marks the end of an era and a sign of new times ahead. As Denmark's postal service delivers its final letter, the traditional post will be no more. After 400 years, state-owned PostNord is closing operations. The iconic red mailboxes are already gone, auctioned off for charity, as the company shifts entirely to parcel delivery next year. Paweł Trzaskowski has the full story.
This is the last time you'll see it. The Danish National Postal Service, PostNord, is delivering its last letters today. It is a big change for a company with such a rich history.
King Christian IV established the Danish Postal Service 400 years ago.
And 4 centuries is a long time to accumulate fond memories. But now these traditional red mailboxes will no longer be needed. Some of them have been dismantled and auctioned off for charity.
The mailboxes disappeared in a snap. They were gone just like that.
And the reason behind PostNord ceasing mail delivery?
The number of letters has dropped by about 90% compared to the year 2000.
Therefore, starting next year, PostNord will focus exclusively on parcel delivery.
Danes are shopping online more than ever before, and PostNord is handling a significantly higher number of packages. We want to be where Danes need us most.
The decision by PostNord, a Swedish-Danish operator, comes as numerous postal companies in the region struggle to find their footing in the digital age. Poczta Polska, Poland's biggest operator, is currently in the process of restructuring. It recorded a loss of nearly 50 million euros in 2024 alone. Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
Tuesday saw a phone call between European leaders, Canada representatives, and Zelenskyy regarding his meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump taking place in Florida on Sunday. But the revised plan and recent developments, is Ukraine any closer to peace? Ivana Stradner, research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, is my guest tonight to try and find the answers to these questions and more. Ivana, thank you so much. Great to have you back on the show.
Always pleasure.
So we've heard from Volodymyr Zelenskyy today, which we mentioned earlier in the show, answering a question posed by TVP World about the words of Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who also spoke earlier after the call, which I mentioned, about the presence of American troops in Ukraine as part of security guarantees. He said, I quote, "This only can be confirmed by the President of the United States. Of course, we're discussing this both with President Trump and with the coalition of the willing. We would like this. It would be a strong position for security guarantees." And this came after Mr. Tusk said the American declaration of the United States' readiness to participate in security guarantees for Ukraine after the conclusion of peace, including the presence of American troops, for example, on the border or on the line of contact between Ukraine and Russia. This seems to be quite a big topic to discuss. Do you think that there is a chance that Donald Trump offered American troops to serve as a security guarantee for Ukraine in the aftermath of the talks we saw in Florida?
I think it's very important that we take security guarantees seriously. But here's the thing. I have no doubt, that President Trump is working very hard to help Ukraine. We already saw after 28-point peace plan that Washington shifted to a new peace plan, which is far from being an ideal, but things are moving. When it comes to security guarantees, I think it's very important to zoom out. And this is why. Putin is not very much worried about that because he knows very well that he already challenged NATO where you are right now in Poland by sending drones. There was cutting sea cables. And with all due respect, what did the West do? Send one more statement, we are greatly concerned. So that's precisely why I'm not worried that Putin is worried about security guarantees because he will test red lines. But here is a caveat. Putin has been also pushing that line on security guarantees as part of his negotiation strategy. Why? Because by asking all those maximalist demands and putting the ball in a Zelenskyy court, so Zelenskyy has to make compromises that Putin will eventually reject and to buy more time and then to reposition his military and to continue. So we are constantly focusing on all those tiny details about a peace plan instead of sometimes zooming out and to see the big picture. Because if Putin truly wants to negotiate in good faith, he would have already agreed to this peace plan. And what happened yesterday with another allegation, that there was a drone attacks on his residence, et cetera, he's trying to make more excuses to buy more time to derail those negotiation processes, et cetera, to make sure, that there is already mid-2026 and there is no solution.
Yes, the case of having the Federation's Ministry of Defense saying that there were 91 drones that hit, that were aiming at the private residence of Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, having 47 before, this is something that it's quite a discrepancy. to put it simply. So what do you think is going to happen next? Because you talked about how we have to zoom out. If Putin is playing for time and he's not willing at any point in time to come to the peace, to come and discuss the peace at the table, where do we stand with this? How much longer is Ukraine going to wait? Because we do see that there are certain losses on the Russian side as well. So he's playing for time, but how much longer?
You're absolutely right. Two things. Let's first discuss this whole thing about drones. I'm still waiting for the evidence coming from the Kremlin. I haven't seen any of that. But the reason is why he has been doing that. Is it a new false flag to derail negotiations? And then, to put again blame on Ukraine and then to claim, well, we cannot negotiate under those conditions. But all we have to understand is that words are cheap. And just look how Russia has been attacking Ukraine over the past few days to send a very clear message. To go back to your point, you're absolutely right that Russia is having tremendous losses. And there are a lot of reports that by the end of 2026, Russian economy is going to be in a significantly even worse situation than where it is right now. So what is Putin hoping for? Russian economy is already a war economy. Putin is not interested in bringing all those people on the front lines back, to a society. So what he needs right now, two things: to buy more time, to make sure that he can reposition his military and eventually to continue. But how that might happen? By two things: making sure that President Trump becomes tired of this negotiation process and gives up, and then put a ball in Europe's court. And Europe is neither willing nor able to help Ukraine on its own. And that's precisely why Putin is fighting for time, because that's an old, KGB strategy that he has been playing for a very long time. This is not the first time that we are talking about negotiations. So what Putin has right now are two things. One is time, and the second is will. And that's precisely why the West should not fall for that trick. Three things. We still have options to push Russia with sanctions. We still have not exhausted all those possibilities. Second thing, we should not move out of the negotiation table the possibility of send long-range missiles and other things to put Russia on the defensive. And, to tell Putin, if you continue, we also can put you on the defensive. And the third pillar, which is extremely important, why is Russia sending his economic envoy to push, for negotiations with the United States by pushing economic development? Why? Because Putin understands very well that President Trump is first and foremost a businessman. He loves to talk business. And by pushing all those things, who cares about Ukraine? We have to be par on par, great powers working together, making like economic developments. That's an old KGB trick that we should absolutely not fall for that. So that's the third pillar where you should absolutely not consider, as of right now, to lift sanctions or to pursue economic cooperation with Russia.
So what about Ukraine? Because we spoke about Russia, we spoke about the losses. We know that they're increasing. The BBC has published a report as well on Russian losses, showing that Russia is losing more and more over time. Not only soldiers, but also when it comes to the sanctions, it's also losing a lot in terms of economy. But what about Ukraine? Do you think we're getting to a point where Ukrainians are going to say, where the Ukrainian officials will give up something that they did not want to give up before to be able to bring this war to an end?
I think people in Ukraine are also very tired of war. And I think they also want this peace. And that's precisely why President Zelenskyy has made certain concessions, whether related to NATO, joining NATO, whether related to territory concessions. And I can go on and on. So it's not that Ukraine is not willing to make certain concessions. Here, the only problem that we have that even if President Zelenskyy makes all those concessions, whether that will be enough for Putin, that's the puzzle here, not whether Ukraine is willing and happy to put an end to this brutal war.
Just before we go, because I know that unfortunately our time is coming to an end, I wanted to ask about the perspective of the Russian civilians, because according to Levada Center, they published a poll in December talking about Russian attitudes towards the war. And according to that, proportion of Russian citizens who consider it necessary to continue hostilities against Ukraine has decreased to 25%, which is the lowest figure since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Do you think that Russians are tired of the war already, and the economic situation that is the consequence of what's happening on the battlefield?
If history is any indication, people in Russia wants to see Russia again, as an imperialist, big country, great power. But here is the thing: nobody likes a loser, and they are not upset at Putin that he's waging this war. They're upset that Putin is not winning. And even though people in Moscow or St. Petersburg are not facing all those difficulties, like in some other parts of Russia, people are increasingly dissatisfied. But that leads me to the next point, which is the Russian economy is already a war economy. And there are so many people who will eventually have to be reintegrated back to the society. And Putin is not willing to do that. And my last point is, in any authoritarian regime, such as Russia, Putin doesn't care about individuals. He is willing and able to sacrifice everyone to remain in power and to maintain, his imperialistic goal. So pride, unfortunately, is going to cost Russia a lot.
A very grim point to make, but unfortunately this marks the end of our program. Ivana, thank you so much for joining me. Ivana Stradner, Research Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, was my guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy New Year, and I hope in 2026 I will deliver some better news.
Happy 2026 to you too, and hope to see you back in the new year. Thank you. And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight. Thank you so much for joining me on the program. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska, and I hope to see you back for more news and features here on TVP World in just a moment.